Welcome to Leaders and Learners. My name is Tanya McKenzie, and you can find me at the intersection of public relations and leadership. Join us as we talk to organizational leaders, elected officials, experts, authors, artists, and personalities, sharing their stories, talking about how they got to where they are and how they continue to learn and lead the way. So without further ado, let's get into it. Greetings, good people. Welcome to another edition of Leaders and Learners, where we all know that the best leaders are lifetime learners. They're always open to learning new things, stepping outside of their comfort zone to make amazing things happen. And today I have someone that you're going to learn a little something from that hopefully will leave you inspired, because we all run into these roadblocks, especially going into the new year. We run into roadblocks as we're trying to put projects together and get things done. And instead of getting frustrated, finding ways to just make it happen. We have to make it happen and not allow for roadblocks to keep these things from taking us backwards, right? Even if we're going slow, we're still going. So we want to make sure that we are able to have that conversation and then get into some new ventures with an amazing woman. She's a civil rights attorney. You can see her sometimes on CNN and other news channels giving her expert opinion on the law, particularly civil rights, protecting your civil rights, making sure that someone's out there looking out for you. I love watching her in person, on TV. I read her books. She's done an amazing job for the people. Miss Areva Martin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Tanya, for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
Thank you. I recently saw you at an event. I'm going to show you a picture, and then I want you, for the people, to give them your feels for this event we witnessed a couple of months ago. So it's at the Jacqueline Avant Children and Family Center. It was a ribbon cutting. Please let the people know what that day meant to you.
Yeah, Tanya, I think you were there when I took the stage at that grand opening, that ribbon cutting ceremony, and got really emotional. And I got emotional because I was looking out into the audience at my son Marty with his companion, therapist, best friend, just all around supporter and protector, a young woman named Alex. And I got emotional because Marty has been so blessed. My son Marty, who's on the autism spectrum, he's had the best in therapies. He's had the best in interventions, the best, schools, medical care, etc. And now he has this young woman who literally he's known since kindergarten, who now works for our family as a therapist, as a companion for Marty. And what standing on that stage as we were cutting the ribbon for the Center for Autism and Developmental Disabilities at the JAC meant for me is that kids from Compton, Willowbrooks, Watts, all over South LA would have an opportunity to meet their Alex. And by that, I mean have a constant presence in their lives of someone that cared for them, that loved them, that had the training and expertise to help them grow and to live their best lives. And I know as a parent, I know as a professional, I know as someone who's been working in South LA for almost 2 decades now, that our children in that community don't often have those opportunities. If you are on the spectrum, if you have a developmental disability and you live in South LA, typically you have had to struggle to get access to the best services, to the best therapists. You've had to travel for miles and miles outside of your community. And opening that center was a dream come true, to have in the heart of our community a center with trained clinicians and professionals, advocates who provide the kind of care to kids, from that community, like the care that my own son Marty has gotten. So it was surreal in a lot of ways because we have been working on that center for a long, long time. And in fact, there's a picture when we did the groundbreaking where we have hard hats on and shovels, and I have blonde hair. So I look at the transition of my hairstyles through the years when we started the groundbreaking until we got to that day in September, which was the ribbon cutting. So it was just an amazing day for me.
I spoke with you right after you had written your book. a while back. And this is when you just had the idea of the center. You knew it was something you wanted to make happen. I don't think all the pieces were put in place yet. But I want you to talk through how this idea came to be and then how you galvanize elected officials in a community around said idea to make that happen.
Yeah, great question. So we have to go back to literally 2011. So, and maybe even it was 2010, but it was the year that Margaret Lee Thomas was elected to the County Board of Supervisors.
Mhm.
There was a big party for him at one of the hotels at the airport. And it was history making because he was the first African American male to sit on that board. We had had Supervisor Yvonne Burke, a female Black woman, but there had never been a Black male on the County Board of Supervisors. It had been a very contentious race between him and then LA City Council member Bernard Parks, and Margaret Lee Thomas had come out on top. Massive party, massive media was at the party. I barely could get a parking space. I barely could get into the party. And I remember a young woman that worked for me at the time. We were going to different parties that night because it was election night. And we managed to find a parking space after about 30 minutes of looking, almost going to give up. And when I got in, I didn't know Margaret Lee Thomas at the time. I had heard about him. Maybe I made a donation to his campaign, very small, but I didn't really have any relationship to him. But Joan Creer, one of his key senior advisors at the time, I ran into her in the hallway of this hotel at this massive party. And I said, Joan, I am so excited for your win, for the team's win. I have a son with autism. I've started a nonprofit called Special Needs Network. I am struggling. The organization is struggling. And I want to bring the resources that are in the valley into the second district. And I would love for your office and this new supervisor to be the champion. We need to do autism in South LA the way it's done in the valley. And that was a quick in the hallway conversation with Joan that led to a meeting with the newly sworn in supervisor that led to a series of listening events that he and his staff hosted with me and other advocates that really led to him becoming, immersing himself in the autism developmental disability community, becoming one of the biggest champions. And so after he was in office for a couple of years, had attended some of our events, had really gotten to know our families, I went to him and I said, look, a part of what we need in our community that we don't have is a state of the art autism center. You go to the valley, you can find centers. I was driving my son one day a week to Santa Barbara. You can find, centers in other places and spaces around this county, but there's nothing like what I envision for our families in the second district. And it took, me selling him on this idea and us figuring out how to bring in the right community partners. And he said, after several of these meetings, let's do it. And I mean, literally, we went, and Senator Butler, LaFonza Butler, did a visit to the center yesterday. I had an opportunity to host her and take her on a tour with Supervisor Holly Mitchell. And what I told the senator was this building, this location, we went through so many iterations. It was going to be at the old MLK hospital. We were going to build a new building that was attached to a school in Compton. We were going to build a building that was near, one of the other facilities on that campus. So we went through a lot of different iterations before it became the JAC, the home where it is, the second floor of the JAC. So uh, it was a dream of mine because I knew what it was like as a parent to travel to Santa Barbara, to travel to Encino, to travel to all of these faraway places. And I also knew I was self-employed. I could do it. I could take time away from my schedule. But I knew if you were a working parent that was punching a clock, or you were a parent working 2 or 3 jobs, your schedule didn't allow for the kind of travel that I was able to do. And I knew if we could get something in our community and something much bigger, much better, much more innovative, that it wouldn't only serve our community, but it would be a model for the state. So that's how we got from going to a very crowded election night party, having a conversation in the hallway with the senior aide, to the then supervisor, to a tour with a new supervisor and our newly appointed U.S. Senator.
I absolutely love that. I applaud you. I do want to ask, Mark Ridley Thomas has gone through a lot during from the beginning of this process, and seeing him there, it was like a standing ovation. What was that process like? Because I know at some point you had to be like, okay, the support that I was getting, they're challenging that. The powers that be are challenging this who I have supporting me in this. But at the end, you were all still standing there celebrating it. And when he walked in the room and that applause was just incredible, what was that feeling like? Just knowing you had him there at the beginning and at the end, even when things got tough.
It's a great question, Tanya, and you're right. He's been through a lot, and the community has responded in different ways. In the beginning of some of his legal troubles, people were kind of standoffish, didn't want him at events, wouldn't take pictures with him. But you see, full circle, as you said, now he goes into public events and he actually gets standing ovations. I think he's going to get a big award next month as well from one of the legacy civil rights organizations. But most importantly, what happened even before his legal issues, there was a complete transition at the County of LA. Our project was not completed by the time Mark Ridley Thomas turned out as LA County Supervisor. And again, a very contentious race between Holly Mitchell, Herb Weston. I had relationships with both of them. Holly Mitchell from the state of California, Herb Weston from when he was at the state, but more recently at the city council. And it's always touch and go, depending on who's looking at what projects and who supported whom. And I tried to stay neutral in that race. I actually moderated a debate between the two of them. Good, again, both good relationships. But I think you heard me say again at the ribbon cutting, there were projects that Holly Mitchell inherited, some of which remain on the cutting room floor, as we say in Hollywood. They did not make it. They didn't cross the finish line, not because, of any vindictiveness on her part, but just a choice that a new leader has to make when they come into a new office. They have to look at the portfolio that they've inherited from their predecessor and decide what can stay, what can go, because they're going to be bringing in, as they should be, their own new projects. And I was so grateful that this the CAD Center was one of those projects that the new supervisor decided to continue to move forward with, because she didn't have to. That was an agreement made. It could have been curtailed. It could have been, there could have been some changes made. I don't think it could have been completely, written off, because it involved county facilities as well that are on the first floor of that building. So it would have been a little complicated to just, erase us off the map of the earth completely. But clearly having her full-throated support, having her completely on board, was a blessing and something that we didn't know going into it. But it has been a tremendous benefit now to have her, like I said, with Senator Butler touring the city and her holding the center. And her holding the center out as an asset in the second district.
Absolutely.
So very, very happy and elated about that.
One more thing. I want to look at this picture one more time. Jacqueline Avant, Child and Family Center. Now, when this project started, she was alive and kicking and still doing a lot of work in the Los Angeles County. And now she's gone. What did it mean to have the building named after her, to have your center in the building named after this woman that is so legendary in Southern California?
Yeah, again, that was really beautiful. And I am so grateful to the individuals, one of them being our now ambassador, Candace Bond McKeever, who was instrumental when the tragic death of Miss Avant occurred. Our ambassador spearheaded the group that went to the county with the recommendation that, in light of all the work that Miss Avant had done in Watts and Willowbrook, particularly focused on children, that the center be named after her. And her daughter, Miss Avant's daughter, Nicole Avant, who's also a former ambassador, did an interview with Gayle King on the CBS morning show where they highlighted the center. She talked about her mother's work and what it meant for her family to have that center named after her. So it's the legacy, right? It's an African American woman who happened to be a philanthropist, who happened to be an influencer in this region, using her resources and her platform to pour into kids in that community. And now, me, an African American woman, leading an organization that's continuing in some ways and building upon and expanding upon the work that she started. So I think it couldn't be a more complete story and circle.
You know, you do a lot of civil rights work, a lot of work with grown-ups. I am someone that fully believes that our youth is going to be our future. Like, we need more investment in our young people. I would like for you to lean a little bit into your legal expertise and talk about, if you don't mind, some of the gun violence and other issues that seem to be plaguing our communities, particularly our county. I'm an LA County Commissioner of Alcohol and Other Drugs. And I know that this drug epidemic is weighing heavily on our young people, just like the gun violence. Where do you feel like we can find more solutions and support and resources for our young people to maybe take some of this weight off of what's going on in our county? I love what you've done with this center, but man, I feel like we have so much work to do with our young people.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And for me, I look at it in terms of, I think you can tell a lot about a government, whether it's a city, a county, a state, or a country, by how they spend their money. Because we know
Amen.
budgets are statements of priorities. And for some reason in this country, we have this inverted, upside down model where we spend a lot more money on the back end than we spend on the front end. And by that, I mean, we spend more money addressing issues after they have already become full blown crises than we spend in early intervention and in preventative, whether it's medicine or educational issues. So, a part of what the center is hoping to do is to disrupt that model beyond just being a place, a place with bricks and walls. The center is really a center for innovative thinking on some of these issues. 70% of the young people that are in the juvenile justice system or the criminal justice system have some diagnosis, developmental disability, mental health issue, learning disability, and oftentimes, particularly when you look at black and brown individuals, undiagnosed,
Mm.
untreated. So, how do we disrupt that? I say we spend more money in the early stages of kids' lives, like on Head Start, like on reading and math and programs, like on quality education, quality healthcare, than we spend on building prisons and jails and on money to fix problems. Let's arrest the problem before it becomes a problem. And we know that that works. We know that when we invest in kids early on, when we give them those tools that they need early on, we can ensure that fewer of our children, particularly those in underserved communities, end up in high school and colleges rather than in county lockups and juvenile detention centers, and then eventually prisons. And we've seen that. You look at MLK, the magnet school. So next to the JAC is Charles R. Drew University Medical School, and then it is the Charles Drew High School. That high school has like a 90% rate when it comes to the students that graduate and go on to some kind of college. Now, that didn't happen just coincidentally. That happened because of the investment that has been made, and that's a public school. It's not a private school. So that is a model, and it tells me that this can be done. It doesn't have to be an isolated school, doesn't have to be an isolated incident. But if you look at the budgets at the city level and the county level, and look at how much goes to things like early, childhood intervention, getting kids early into programs, gang and violence prevention, versus how much we spend in our criminal justice system, in our prisons and our jails, and it's a disproportionate number. And I think until we as a society come to grips with that and make our kids a priority, we're going to continue to be plagued by those issues that you identified. And let's keep it real, Tanya. So much of this is race. I mean, at the bottom of many of these issues And when we try to disrupt some of these systems, we are met with a lot of opposition. We are met with residents that say that happens over there. I don't want my county dollars. I don't want my city dollars being spent on, these fundamental needs because it's not impacting my community. And that is such a narrow and a myopic way of thinking because what impacts South LA impacts West LA. What impacts South LA impacts the West Valley. So until we start, really addressing and being honest with why we have so much opposition when we try to invest in these neighborhoods, we're not going to see much change.
So I'm going to be a little facetious here and throw this out. When I first moved to Redondo Beach some years ago, like 10 years ago, some of these conversations came out and some preventative conversations like, let's do this so we don't have those problems. And of course, most of the residents are like, that ain't us, that's them over there. Well, over the last 2 months, we've had not gun violence, but loaded guns showing up at our high school. So now we can have the conversation about what we should have been doing. And now we can do some of these things. But it's almost like we have elected officials in office that are only willing to do the reactive work and not the proactive work, which at the end of the day, you wind up having to do and spend on because you were not forward thinking. And
Right.
then the rest of the communities that you thought wasn't going to be affected wind up being affected. So even when they try to run from it, it still winds up slapping them in the face at some point. Like you cannot continue to act like these things don't happen and they won't eventually leak into your communities too. So it's weird for me to watch us continue to elect those that refuse to see that the budget matters and being preventative
And
matters.
there is no iron gate that separates Redondo Beach, from Watts or Willowbrook or
Nothing.
Compton or Beverly Hills. And we've seen, robberies and, theft and all kinds of crimes in some of these quote unquote affluent communities that, again, has caused those people, as you said, to have to stop and rethink.
Rethink.
So it's over there mentality, right? Because they're now realizing there's no such thing as over there. We are all interwoven. We're all, connected in ways that what happens in one community is going to spill over and have some impact in my community. And I need to care, about it. And it's part of the social contract, right? So I may not have kids in public schools, but I can't say I don't want my dollars going to public schools because I'm going to benefit from having well-educated kids, well-educated leaders that, as you said, go on to be in these positions of power that impact my life. So this notion of, individualism doesn't work in a society and in a community like ours.
And not only do they wind up redirecting their actions, but redirecting their funding. So now these other things you wanted to do with your funds have to be redirected to fixing a problem that you could have prevented, mostly pouring it into our young people. But I digress. Eventually, hopefully, they'll get it.
Well,
Otherwise,
stay on it because, as the center proves, change is slow, but change can happen.
yeah.
And
Amen.
it's not overnight. And these are problems that have, predate us. They predate us, but we all have an opportunity to keep chipping away. And that's how progress is made in this country.
Speaking of chipping away, what happened in Manhattan Beach not too long ago with Bruce's Beach was something that many people did not expect to happen. And now it seems to be happening all over California and various other places, the reclamation of Black land. I've been a commissioner in this district for a while, so I was happy to see this spark light a fire. And now you are involved in your own fire that you're putting out in Palm Springs. Tell us about how you got involved in the reclamation of Black land. And I didn't even know that that was a thing in Palm Springs.
Yeah, it's ironically that you use the word fire because what happened to thousands of Black and brown residents in Palm Springs in the 50s and 60s is that they were literally burned out, and I do mean literally with fire, burned out of their homes because they were racially targeted by a city that wanted to create a white homogeneous community. And even though these Black and brown residents had come into the city at a time that they were building its foundation, and they played a significant role in helping to build that foundation. When their labor was no longer needed, the city needed them to be gone. And rather than relocate them, rather than humanely and constitutionally and legally relocate them, they used sheer force and might, and they bulldozed and burned them out of their homes. And for 60 years, they buried the story. They created a false narrative around the story. And over the last year and a half or so, I've been working with these residents, trying to, one, right the wrong by correcting the narrative and elevating the narrative. A story, as you just said, you didn't know. Many folks didn't know that there was a huge influx of Black folks from the South into Palm Springs in the 40s and 50s as they were escaping, or thought they were escaping, Jim Crowism, moving into the desert, looking for opportunities, looking for the American dream, only to find some of the same racially restrictive covenants and laws around housing and employment that existed in the South, existed in our sunny, beautiful, palm tree lined California. And they were confined to this one community called Section 14. It's the only place that Black and brown folks were able to live because of these racially restrictive housing covenants. And despite their tremendous contributions to this community, they were literally burned out of Palm Springs. And it's interesting, we talk a lot about Bruce's Beach. I was, heavily vested in that, following the case very closely, very good friends with George Fatherly, one of the lawyers that was involved. And I've had this conversation with many folks, Bruce's Beach, the positive, the wonderful result, the returning of those 4 parcels of land to the Bruce descendants, and then the ultimate sale of the land to the county. Have to keep in mind that happened right after George Floyd's murder, when we were in this so-called racial reckoning in this country, when people across the country were willing to take a look at systemic racism and how African Americans had been dispossessed and how land had been stolen from them. You fast forward to the bill signed by Governor Newsom creating the California Reparations Task Force around the state, studying what happened to Black folks here, the 1,000+ page report, the 100+ recommendations. New York Governor Kathy Hochul just 2 weeks ago signing a similar bill, creating a task force similar to the California task force in New York. And cities, St. Louis, Detroit, New Orleans, Seattle, Sacramento, all looking at this issue of systemic racism, reparations, reclaiming of Black land. But Tanya, the sobering piece here is, other than Evanston, Illinois, that did create a reparations package that provided some housing assistance to Black folks in Evanston who suffered as a result of redlining and other racist policies in Evanston, we have not seen examples of positive enactment of either laws or compensation being paid to African Americans. So there's a lot of activity, but we have to be very clear that we're in a different moment in this country and in this state than we were in May, June, July, August, September of 2020. And this moment, we have seen tremendous backlash to efforts, particularly efforts around Black folks. We've seen the Supreme Court striking down affirmative action in college admissions. We've seen, the chipping away at DEI and now lawsuits challenging DEI programs. So I don't know. I'd like to think Bruce's Beach would have happened in 2023 in the way that it happened in 2020. Not sure of that. And I think the jury is still out on how successful these efforts, including mine in Palm Springs, will be, because of the backlash and because of where we are in this country in 2023 versus where we were in 2020. So I tell people, watch this space. We cannot let up, and we cannot assume that Bruce's Beach is going to be the model that will be implemented or enacted around the state. There is no guarantee of that.
And I think it's important to know that this is why elections matter, right? So even here in the South Bay, We have a very strong NIMBY community, not in my backyard. So, as California is still trying to solve the homeless issue and make sure that everyone stays up to code with the housing they're providing, particularly the mayor here, they fighting it. They're fighting all of the opportunities for new housing, trying to put all the obviously low income housing in the spaces they don't want black and brown faces. You got our governor suing our city. It is crazy, but I want to know from you, how does that change your strategy? Because one thing I have learned about you is you don't stop, you don't backpedal, you just switch it up. So talk to me about how that changes your mindset and your strategy in regards to how you are going to get it done. Because one way or
Yeah,
another,
right.
I see you getting it done.
I'm not giving up. I'm just clear-eyed about the
Yes.
assignment and the challenges. And I think there was a period after Bruce's Beach where everyone thought this was our time, this was our moment between Bruce's Beach and the reparations task force, that there was going to be this outpouring of support, and we were going to see white liberals locking arms with black folks in our very democratic legislature and in many of our very democratic cities, and saying, yes, let's write the check. Yes, let's give property back. Yes, yes, yes. And that is not happening. So we just have to be clear about this moment. So for me, what that means is, one, I got to work harder and I got to run faster. And I've got to be far more strategic about what this looks like. This is not a singular play. This is going to involve a strategy that is, public relations driven, media driven, legislatively driven, legally driven. Every lever that I can tap, every relationship, every resource that's out there, I have to be able to bring those together. This is not a singular strategy. I would say, play. And I see folks around the country looking at this, and they're looking to models like Bruce's Beach, and they're looking to Evanston, but I don't think many of them recognize the unique set of circumstances that were at play uh, in Bruce's Beach. And I'll give you an example. The governor in Bruce's Beach, the governor of California, very, very heavily involved. I mean, was at press conferences taking credit, doing what he needed to do on the legislative front. When the legislative task force, reparations task force, asked for an extension, there was a bill put forth. He didn't sign that bill.
Hmm.
There's no money in the California budget right now for reparations. We know there's a budget deficit. So we shouldn't, ignore what those votes or lack of votes mean. I mean, they are signaling something. So it just says that folks have got to be incredibly strategic and collaborative. And that's what I'm doing. I mean, in Palm Springs, I'm working with folks all over the country. This is not just a local matter, it's a national issue. And I've brought in experts from all over the country and looking at folks who can, be influential in helping bring forth the kind of solution that I think and my clients deserve, is over 1,000 of them deserve. So, we're not backing down. We're not going away. We're going to get louder. We're going to, like I said, we're going to be on those out there in those streets more, but we're also going to be, working smarter as we're also working harder. So I just say to anybody out here doing this work, don't be discouraged, but you've got to be incredibly, incredibly strategic, the word you use. And I'd say collaborative and innovative, because there is not a straightforward pathway to get any of this done. And what was prevalent in the in the space around Bruce's Beach, a lot has changed. A lot has changed. You just need to be aware of that.
One thing I know for sure is that you have an energy around you that seems to bring people together. It is very celebratory. Feels very girlfriend driven. You always have this positive energy and collection of great minds around you. Have you always been that way? Was it like that for you in college too? Or were you more of a lone, like what is your life like? Because you always got girlfriends around you, and there's women that just don't can't do that thing with girls, but ma'am, you are like the sister that everybody wants and needs. What is that?
First of all, thank you for that, Tanya. And check out my Facebook post because I had 16 of those amazing women yesterday. We went for a day trip up to Temecula. You know, my girl, one of my closest friends from college, her name is Terry Hamilton Brown. I'll call her out on this. She always made fun of me for doing what she says was I was notorious for bringing apples and oranges together and bringing, and the metaphor was disparate people, right? So bringing people together who ordinarily you wouldn't think had anything in common. And I just believe that people have more in common than not. And my life, I grew up in a very poor community, North St. Louis, in a housing project, grew up with a paraplegic grandmother, didn't know my father until I was 18. So, to the extent people use the word dysfunctional and it's pejorative, I'll look me up in the dictionary and there I am, dysfunctional family and all the pejorative that goes with it, but all the positive that goes with that too, because being in a community with incredibly strong, resilient Black women, made a difference in my life. So St. Louis, North St. Louis housing project, all the way to Ivy League, premier law school, Harvard Law School graduate. So my life just spans such a broad spectrum. And I have never, ever forgotten from whence I came, never, ever will. And I don't believe that my friends who in LA now, who would be the kinds of people that I would have met in that housing project in St. Louis, I know that they have something in common with my Harvard Law School friends, graduates, because I am that person. So I have both things that I have learned and people that I know and things that I enjoy from living in that housing project to my experience as a Harvard trained lawyer. So I don't buy into this notion that, your lawyer friends can only be with your lawyer friends and your, business owner friends can only, no. If you look at that picture from Temecula, I've got my 75-year-old aunt who's a former educator. I got friends who grew up, in deep South Central LA and who still live in that part of town, to my stepsister who is a MD from Memphis, Tennessee, to another lawyer here in LA who works at one of the premier big corporate law firms. I mean, we are a melting pot. And we had a great time. So I'm a connector of people because I don't buy into those tropes or, traditional notions that only people who have similar backgrounds can get along or work together. And yeah, if you come to my party, you're gonna meet, what people would call the hood rats, and you're gonna meet people from the Ivy. So, and I get along with all of them. So
I love that. Thank you for sharing. I do want to thank you. Some years ago when we had our first conversation, you gave me permission to code switch, and I'm telling you, it's worked wonders. Like I'm comfortable in that now because that has been a conversation in our community. Like, should we not? When can we? I was like, Areva told me,
and do it. And people respect you. I mean, it's who we are, right? We are we're holistically, we're multi-layered
right.
people. I'm not just one thing. You're not just one thing. You have had life experiences that cause you to be a multi, faceted, you have so many, levels and layers to your personality. And why do we have to just show up as one of those? So, we have, as Black women in particular, I think have been put in this box. And sometimes we go, we contort ourselves into all kinds of knots trying to fit into that box. And I feel like we should just be whoever we are and people adjust. I mean, and I was showing my husband a picture of Senator Mitchell. I'm sorry, of Senator Butler. And you know Senator Butler, right? Did you know
Yes.
her when she was SEIU president?
Yes. Yes.
And I don't know if you watched her career. She went from SEIU. She worked with a Democratic consulting firm. I think she worked with one of the big tech firms, and she went on to become the president of Emily's List.
Yep.
Now she's a U.S. senator. So she's a prime example of someone who has she's been in the trenches. I've marched with her on the streets, over affordable living wages for home health care workers. So here's a woman whose career has, been as a community organizer, as a union organizer, who now is in the halls of the U.S. Senate. So you've got to be able to code switch because she's got to talk to those home healthcare workers. Some of them haven't even graduated from high school. They've got to trust her enough that she can lead them as their president. But then she's got to be able to go and converse with 49 other U.S. senators and command their respect in the U.S. Senate, and then go over to the White House and talk to the president and the vice president. So, she couldn't just be, Senator Butler. She's got to be union organizer, LaFonza out on the picket line, out in those LA streets, as we would say, in order to also be that effective senator in the halls of the U.S. Senate. And I believe the leaders who are the most effective have the ability to, traverse that entire spectrum.
Yes, absolutely. So definitely thank you. Wanted to thank you for that. Thank you for your advice. Thank you for the work that you're doing in Palm Springs and all through this nation. You pop up in all the spaces that need your voice.
Thank you
And
so much.
for being a true example of a girlfriend. Like, I think we need that also, along with the legal stuff and the
Oh
practical
God,
stuff. Like,
that's the nourishment, right? That's what keeps
we
us
need that.
going. Yes.
We absolutely need that. So let the people know before I get you out of here where they can get in touch with you or follow your journey, because it is an amazing one to watch. It's inspirational and it gives us hope.
Thank you so much. You can follow me on all social media platforms at Areva Martin. That's Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, X, formerly known as Twitter. You can find out about my work at Palm Springs on my website, arevamartin.com, on my law firm's website, martin-martin.com. You can find out about my nonprofit work at Special Needs Network at snnla.org. So I got a bunch of websites out there, but follow me on social. I'm talking about these issues, whether it's Palm Springs, whether it's about the Autism Center, whether it's about what's happening, as you said, nationwide around this issue of reparations and reclaiming our property. I try to, one of the things I really endeavored to do, Tanya, during the COVID, I started a online show, was just to help people get information, because we talked briefly about, elections matter, who we vote for matters, but so often people don't have trusted information. I try to be that trusted voice to people, give it to them real, no sugar, so that people can make informed decisions. Because I think all too often people are reading the headlines, they're not getting into the nuance of these issues, and oftentimes they are electing people maybe on a single issue, but not realizing how harmful that person may be, to their best interest or their family's best interest or the community's interest otherwise. So definitely check me out on social, and follow me. You'll see some of the shows and some of the episodes that I do on some of these really important issues, because we have an election year coming up. I mean, probably one of the most important elections in our lifetimes. And we say that every election cycle, but this really, really feels like one of the most important. And I want to make sure people have all the information they need.
It just keeps getting crazier. Oh my God. Thank you so much. I'm wishing you the best in 2024. I will definitely be watching and rooting for you and out doing the work to try to help any way that I can. So thank you so much for being here. And I just appreciate you.
Oh, appreciate you too. Happy holidays to you and the best to you in 2024.
Thanks so much.
Going to be epic.
Thanks.
All right. Take care.
Hey, thanks for showing up to the podcast where we all know that the best leaders are lifetime learners. When you get a sec, take a moment, leave a comment. What do you think about today's episode? And share it with someone that you know could use the gems that were dropped today. Follow and subscribe. You don't want to miss who's coming up next. You never know who could show up here and what they could say. For your professional needs, marketing, PR, communications, and leadership, make sure you follow us on all social media platforms at Sand and Shores, or hit us up at sandandshores.com. Again, thanks so much for showing up. We appreciate you, and we'll see you soon.